excited for you to join us here regarding first year students. I'm going to go ahead and have our presenter to share their screen, and we'll go ahead and get started. And as they do that, I will just give a quick introduction of myself if we have not met before. My name is Ashley O'Neill, and I serve as the strategy lead for Gateway Court Success at the Collaborative. And leading this initiative along with myself are the senior fellows for Gateway Court Success. We will have this hour be about, again, first year students. And before we get started and I turn it over to our presenter, I would like to introduce to this community of practice, Tracy Teeter, who serves as our newest strategy lead at the Collaborative. She is leading our adult attainment strategy. And I would just like to give Tracy the opportunity to introduce yourself and if you'd like to share anything with the group.
Thank you. No, just hello, excited to be here, excited to be with this team and then to get to know everyone along the way. As Ashley said, my role is going to be to look at innovations to impact adults that are starting, returning, and completing their post-secondary goals. So just look forward to being with you all today and getting to know you along the way. So thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Tracy. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our presenter for the next few moments, Dr. Shane Redman at Eastern Kentucky University, who will again talk to us about all things first year, first generation. So, Shane, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. So I'd like to begin our presentation here on first generation students. Let me get my slideshow going again. So we're talking about first year, first generation students. So I want to give some special shout outs here. I want to be honest about this. One of the goals of a Student Success Collaborative is to recognize student voices. And so a lot of what you're going to see in these slides are the direct work of several students from EKU who helped me out with this project, who I went to and said in their capstone class, hey, I have to give a presentation to the CPE on first year and first generation students. What can you help me come up with? So a lot of the credit goes to Hadley Hardin and Trinity Maxwell and Reagan Wiseman, who contributed greatly to this talk. Also, a shout out to Star Wenzel at EKU, who had a great conversation with me about first year and first generation students. Let's see, am I getting us advanced to the right screen here? Let me exit out of this and make sure I'm on the right screen here.
You're on your PowerPoint, but not slideshow.
Thank you. Let's do a restart here. Technology is week number 1 for all of us back, right? Well, it is at least at EKU. Hooray, and now are we back in slideshow form?
No, but I think you're okay.
All right.
Yeah, there you go. Brandon Elm said there's a switch screen button. I can see the rest of it. Hold on. If you're using three, yeah, you're probably using 2 monitors, aren't you?
I think we're going to get that
now
right
now you're perfect.
There we go. Excellent. All right. So thank you for bearing with us. Let's dive back in. So if you've been to some of these other talks that we've given through the community of practice, we start by defining our terms. And so we should define our terms here. What is a first generation
Sorry,
student?
Dash. It's not gonna work out today.
And as we've seen with everything else, the definition is a little bit fuzzy. First generation student typically defined as a student without a parent who earned a 4-year college degree, although more than a quarter of higher education institutions still do not have a formal definition. We'll work with the definition of first generation student is one who does not have a parent who earned a 4-year degree. So what do we know about first generation students? We know that since the 90s, these are national numbers, that the number of first generation students has been decreasing. Well, we also notice here in this graph that the number of the proportion of first generation students who enter college does not match the proportion that is graduating from college. So there's some success issues with first generation students, and we'll talk about some of those issues coming up soon. Where does Kentucky rank in terms of first generation students? Well, we rank 7th nationally, right behind Louisiana, with 43% of our students as first generation students. This is a group that is ripe to work with, especially if we think about goals like the CPE's 60 by 30 goal. The goal to have 60% of the adult population with a degree or credential by 2030. This is certainly a group that we would want to work with if we want to meet a goal like this. So I want to get a feel for us out there. So I'm going to exit from share screen for a moment so I can see what everybody's saying here. Is anyone attending this meeting a former first generation student? I'll be the first to raise my hand here. I am a first generation student. Neither of my parents got a college degree before I graduated. So just say yes in the chat or maybe raise a hand. I see several people responding out there. And we have a follow-up question here. So if you raised your hand or if you're a first generation student, was there a particular tool or resource that helped you out as a first generation student? What helped you as a first generation student? See, grants, counselor, an RA, so lots of personal connections, TRIO programs, siblings, advisors, mentioning more programs, small school, excitement about college, more good advisors, lots of excellent things here. Regional campus. Very good. So as we go through the presentation, we'll see that first generation students have some unique challenges, just like I'm having some unique challenges with my PowerPoints today. Thank you for bearing with me. So first generation students have many unique challenges. Many first generation students are not even aware they were first generation students. And those who are do not share that information with their colleges or their colleagues because of their need to fit in with their peers. I found that this quote really touched my heart. Perceived as different at home and different at school, first generation college students often feel like they don't belong in either place. These students are
Your PowerPoint isn't where it's supposed to be.
Thank you. I've gone to dual screen again.
Beautiful.
All right. So first generation students face that extra perceived pressure, the guilt almost of leaving home and leaving behind those family obligations, and then the pressure of getting there and not having any experience through family members of what it's like to be a college student and feeling out of place. First generation students often have different motivations. When asked why are you going to college? Overwhelmingly, first generation students say to help their family, not a main goal amongst non-first generation students. They also feel an obligation to help their community over first generation students. So different pressures, different motivations. I found this slide interesting here. So here we're looking at where do first generation students go in terms of college selectivity. So the orange represents the first generation students. And if you look at the top graph, moving from left to right, we're moving from highly selective institutions to open admissions institutions. So what do we find? As the college selectivity goes down, the proportion of first generation students go up. So first generation students are choosing the institutions that are not as highly selective. But many of us represent state institutions here. These are the institutions that those students are choosing. What I think is just as interesting is if you look at the success rate in the bottom graph, we see that at all types of institutions, first generation students lag behind their non-first generation peers in terms of graduation rates. But look at the gap grow as we go down in terms of college selectivity. So not only are first generation students lagging behind their non-first generation peers, but as we go down towards lower college selectivity, towards open admissions, that gap grows. So these are the students that we are seeing, and these are the challenges they're facing. Some more demographics here. So first generation students by sex, that we see the distribution is very similar to the national distribution, majority female. If we look at first generation students broken down by race, not a ton of differences between the distribution there. But where we do see a real difference between first generation and non-first generation students is in socioeconomic status. So in this graph on the left, we're looking at first generation students, and we see overwhelmingly the vast majority of first generation students come from the lowest and second lowest quartiles in terms of socioeconomic status. If you look at non-first generation students, that's almost the inverse, isn't it? The overwhelming majority come from the highest quartiles in terms of socioeconomic status. So in addition to the other issues that we've talked about in terms of challenges of first generation students, those economic and financial pressures impact them more than they do their non-first generation peers. So if we haven't convinced you enough that first generation students are a group to focus on in terms of the unique challenges they face, then money talks, doesn't it? If we look at Senate Bill 191 from last year, it was a change to the state performance-based funding formula. So that now in the funding formula, underrepresented students are now defined as first generation college students. And the wording of the bill was that for performance-based funding for the bachelor's degree institutions, 1.5% of allocable resources will be determined by bachelor's degree production for first generation students. And for the KCTCS system, I believe it's about 1% instead of 1.5%. So money talks, doesn't it? And this slide, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but if you've not dove into the mysterious world of performance-based funding, this is sort of a list of the different areas where our state institutions are measured on performance-based funding. You see the gray bar there for the first generation bachelor's degree production. That is a category where the schools have not been ranked yet because we haven't collected that data yet. So it will be part of the funding formula in the future. So thanks to UK for providing this graph of how performance-based funding is distributed. So if nothing else, we should be convincing you now, if it's part of our funding formula, that we want to concentrate on first generation students. So what can we do? And as my students were preparing this in some of their notes, they had a link to a very interesting study, and the mathematician and statistician side of me said, a study on this. That's what I want to hear. So I want to talk a little bit about an experiment that happened in Nebraska. Nebraska, from 2012 to 2016, randomly assigned financial aid to graduating high school seniors attending both 2-year and 4-year public colleges, and then studied what's the effect of this. So, I mean, we've always thought as academics, well, we want more students to participate in the college process, let's give financial aid. But how often do we get a chance like this to run an honest to goodness experiment with a control group and a treatment group to see how financial aid helps? And this study is fascinating and tracked the progress of students on tons and tons of different areas. And one of those areas they tracked was first generation students who got financial aid versus first generation students who didn't get financial aid. Generally, financial aid helped graduation rates, but it was not universally a significant factor across all the variables that were measured. But one of the variables where it was most significant, the contribution, was in terms of first generation students. The share of participants who completed a 4-year degree was higher amongst the treatment group, those who received aid, than for the control group. And this was, again, one of the most significant variables they measured. And you look especially in years 5 and 6 in terms of degree production, that financial aid to students really helped. Interesting, in this study, at the same time they were looking at financial aid versus non-financial aid, they also looked at mentoring programs for these students. So students who received financial aid, some of them were just given the aid, and others were told to participate in a mentoring program to continue to get the aid. There was very little difference between the performance between those who had a mentoring system and those who did not. But of course, this study is now about 10 years old and the situation has changed. And I think maybe our modern students have different needs out there. So we've talked about first generation students and how they're different. We've talked about one solution, which is to give financial aid. And boy, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had enough money to throw at every problem, and that was a way we could address everything. So scholarships and financial support, it looks like they help. And we may even have, through the Nebraska study, some empirical, honest to good evidence that those things do help. But of course, finances are limited for us, and we can't always use that as the only solution. So what other things can we do and are we doing for first generation students? Well, one of the things I think we can work on that's a low cost way to help those students is to help them better access resources and non-financial support. So first generation students are coming into a culture that we are well acquainted with. And when we say words like office hour and syllabus and advising and tutoring, they have very clear meanings to us. But to a first generation student, those might be mysterious words. And so we need to do a good job explaining access to resources, financial and non-financial, to those students. I think a lot of us are working with first year students and hoping that we can get them acclimated to the college culture through our first year courses. So I think almost every institution in Kentucky has some version of this first year course, first semester course, might have several different names. My question to the group is, we're a committee on gateway course success. Should a first year course be considered a gateway course, just like mathematics and English is? Is it a key to success for these students? And so something we should definitely consider here. And what is happening in our first year courses? At EKU, we just transitioned from a platform where certain students took a 3 credit hour first year course and others took a 1 credit hour first year course, to now all our students, all our incoming students, take that 3-hour first year course. And the data is still not in yet. Data is still not in yet on the difference there, but it just seems like we need to reach those students, and the first year courses are a great place to do that. Cohorts and socialization. We're dealing with students coming in who are the post-pandemic generation. And so while cohorts and mentoring might not have had as big an effect in 2012 to 2016, all evidence out there, empirical and otherwise, anecdotal and otherwise, says these students need extra help with socialization, with forming cohorts, with forming those connections, especially those first generation students who are new to a college culture and a college campus. So what can we do to forge those connections that make it easier for those students to integrate into the system and more likely to stay with our system, more likely to persist? And we need to study our post-pandemic cohorts for solutions that serve them best. We have students, and if you've been in education for 20 plus years like I have, you've seen trends change, and the good instructors change along with the students that they serve. So what are our solutions for a post-pandemic student body? So I wish I had the solutions. I wish I had an extremely rich donor like Nebraska did in 2012 to let us conduct our own experiment on financial aid for students. So I think let's do the next best thing, which is let's brainstorm with each other in some breakout sessions here and consider some questions here and share with each other what we're doing. So some general questions I'd like the breakout groups to consider would be the following. What do first generation students need? What do you see they need in terms of academic success, in terms of persistence? What do first generation students need? What's working well for first generation students on your campus? Is your campus, is your institution doing something that's working for these students? And what other challenges are you and your students facing? So I'm going to exit out of the PowerPoint here at this point, and I think we're going to form several breakout groups out there. Ashley, are you going to set up the breakout groups for us?
Right.
Yes, there should be a pop-up screen that will pop up, and on the last slide.
Yeah, I got off at
Um,
3:30.
You got off, I hear that.
My-
I've got the breakout rooms ready to go whenever.
Yes, we're ready, Nan, for the breakout rooms, and you can choose where you'd like to go, which category. On the last slide there, Shane had academic support. There is a non-academic support. There is support as it relates to our students. So you can choose the experience that you want to have. And as soon as Nan pops that up on the screen, we will break out and talk for about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll bring it back to the group and do a little bit of sharing out. So we hope that something within your brainstorming session, resonated, and we'll see what we get. So Nan, we're ready when you are.
Our breakout sessions. One of the great things about breakout sessions is that we get to interact with each other. But one of the downsides to breakout sessions is we don't get to hear what happens in the other sessions. So this is our time where we get to debrief each other. So I'm going to call on each of my senior fellows who were in the breakout sessions to give us a quick, just a couple minute summary of what was happening in your session. So I'm going to go in the order I have here. Academic support, was that Kanya? Can you give us a breakdown of what happened in your breakout session?
Of course, we had such a great session. We had a lot of robust conversation. A lot of us were first generation students, so we were able to tie back our experience to ourselves in college and some of the things that we struggled with and some of the things our students still struggle with, similar to what we did. We talked about our needs, what our first gen students need, belonging, a sense of belonging, personal connections. We want faculty and staff to be able to make personal connections with the students, opportunities for our students to talk to others in class, again, building that community. Community was a big thing that we kept going back to, making sure that they belong. that they feel like they belong there. I really liked, Tina mentioned that she focuses on timely, detailed, repeated instructions and directions. And we like the word repeated, that we have to sometimes, repeat ourselves. And she had a great quote that I think she said her dean gave her at the beginning when she started working, and I wrote it down. Be prepared to repeat yourself often and graciously. And I love the graciously part because I got the often down. I got to make sure it's always gracious. So we really talked about confidence building, belonging, community. We felt like that's what our students needed. Also, we kind of touched on the other topics of other breakout groups of those non-academic issues like mental health counseling and food insecurity and all those types of needs. So we had a great conversation, just brainstormed and just shared with each other about what we're doing in our own institutions, how we're trying to build that community for our students.
Excellent. Thank you. So
Sure.
next on my list is student basic needs. Kasha, would you like to discuss what happened in that group?
I'm not sure we kind of discussed student basic needs. We just took the questions very general, so it was a good discussion. Let's see, I'm going to actually just share real quick. So some of the things we talked about as far as the basic needs are in some respects just learning how to communicate with the resources, with their family, to be able to express what it is they need. And something that was really good was this, I'm doing this because we need to help give them their reason so they can answer that question. I am taking FYE 100 or FYE class because I'm going to college, because I'm doing this, because actually helping them understand that there's a reason that these things are being asked of them. And if they can understand that reason or the ultimate goal behind it, maybe that can help bridge some gaps. There was some comments about there seems to be a little bit more skepticism and lack of trust of higher education as an institution with some of our incoming freshmen. So we really need to help bridge whatever gaps there are there and let them know that this is a valuable experience and they're doing this for a reason. What was working well, we had someone mentioned they're doing a new student orientation. They got a grant fund for non-college ready students. So it was specific to them, and they spent a lot of time focusing on time management and how college fits in to their life. And I think that's very important for first gen. I think it's important for the high school students because they don't understand the time commitment yet. And it's important for non-traditional students because they need to figure out how they're going to continue to raise a family, work, and go to school. So really focusing on that time management component and prioritizing, making plans. Having faculty and instructors and advisors that are very involved to the point of intrusive, yet supportive and motivating. And I asked, did they have a program that helped their faculty and advisors learn this? And so now it's really just establishing that culture in the institution. And I think a lot of us have had that happen where our institutions are trying to foster this culture of mine. It was students first, whatever you can do to help bridge gaps, prioritize students, make them feel like belonging, go back to the belonging in the community. And then the last one we were able to talk about was finding ways to have students help other students. It was mentioned that even if they're not listening to us or if they're not getting our emails, they do talk to each other. So if we can find a way to utilize students as the director of resources, meaning the person that helps guide students to the resources to help encourage engagement. Hey, come on, I'm heading here. Why don't you come with me? There's a group going on. There's an activity going on. I'm going to tutoring. How about you join me? And really having some real student advocates to help other students bridge that gap. Can't say we know how to do this, but these are the ideas.
Excellent. Thank you, Kasha. Next on the list is non-academic considerations. John, do you want to give us a brief recap of what happened in that breakout session?
Yeah, we had a great conversation. In fact, it was so good that I need to make a mental note to tell Ashley we need to lengthen these breakout session conversations because it felt like we were getting going and then we stopped. So we have like 10 more minutes. I think that would be great. So I'm going to say it now because otherwise I will forget when we have our debrief meeting. So the kind of thread that we had, and I'm glad Kasha really focused on the what's working well because we focused on what the challenges were for first generation students. And the thread that kind of ran through it was the fact that these students just don't really understand how college works. And that was manifesting itself through a lack of financial aid knowledge, a lack of soft skills, study skills, time management skills, you know, really didn't understand the value of a college education. So it was affecting motivation if they didn't know what their, major outcome was going to be or what their goals were. But it all seemed to kind of work together. And so we all kind of went around and shared a few things that were related to that and saw that thread. And then we started talking about, all right, what can we do to approach that or to try to turn that around a little bit. And we kind of had two different, categories that we looked at. So we looked at onboarding and we looked at proactive support in the first semester. So onboarding was, talking about, ways you can structure orientation, but, orientation isn't required by everybody. It's different at different places, it's online and in person. What does that look like? So really thinking about making that intentional and ways to support those students, especially first generation students, to get them in the right mindset to be successful in college. So someone mentioned how they can text students before classes start. And I think it was a great example of just a quick text like, hey, do you have any questions about anything? You're about to start college. Is there anything we do to help you out? So even those like quick touch points is a way to kind of open that relationship and open that communication. I thought was really great. How can you utilize data to provide targeted outreach? So I shared an example of how we're reaching out to students with financial aid issues. FAFSA on file, but selected for verification or a mismatch of social security number. So they should be eligible for FAFSA, but hasn't gone through yet because there's something that the student needs to do to make that connection. You can also do targeted outreach to first generation students, to students that are the most likely in need of that support in the first semester. The flip side, how can we be more proactive about responding to student struggles in that first semester? So example someone gave of a student that had a car accident in the first couple weeks of class, but didn't tell anybody. All right, do you have an early alert system? If you notice a student has been falling behind or not showing up, what can we do to encourage professors and faculty to raise those flags, raise those alerts? And then what's the process? Who is responding to those? What does that look like? How can we make sure we keep students from falling in the cracks early on to ensure that success, build that relationship and keep them around? So those are just a couple things that we talked about.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And our last breakout room, Dee, can you give us a brief summary of what happened in that breakout group?
Oh, absolutely. Nobody showed up, so I ended up joining John's NIM breakout room because everybody else was already assigned to different rooms. So that's as brief as I could be.
Well, that is great because we are in the last few minutes of our time allowed anyway. And so we have a few announcements to fit in. So I think I will turn it back over to Ashley for ending announcements here.
Yeah, I tried to pop in as well because Dee and I were partnered together in that last room, but because everybody else was having a good time, we're the fortunate ones to pop in and out of the other discussions and really good discussions. John, I hear you noted more time in the breakout session, dutifully noted, which leads me to the closing announcements. Save the date for our next community of practice, which will be Thursday, March 6th. 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well. And that topic, again, will follow suit of being that of academic support. So we hope that you can join us at that time. If you have not already done so, the Student Success Summit is within a 2-week time frame. I believe registration closes January 31st, so about next week. If you have not had the opportunity to register, we would love for you to join us. We have great speakers lined up for this community engagement, so please, if you can. And last but certainly not least, we would love for you guys to scan the QR code that Shane will put on the screen and provide us with any feedback that you have about these sessions or any topics that you would like for us to discuss moving forward. We want to make sure that we engage our audience as well. And without any other further announcements, I think
I added the link to the chat, so you can just click on it.
Yes, thank you for that as well. And this was recorded, so the Student Collaborative will put this on our Impact Exchange website. So if you'd like to access it or you can't remember what we said from this discussion or in your breakout rooms, you can find it there as well. Jeff Bailey said, do you know when they're going to receive the parking passes for the summit? I do not, but I can ask and follow up. I don't know if Nan is still on the call. Maybe she can also speak to that, but if not, we'll follow up with you for sure.
I think it's closer. I can't answer specifically, but it's definitely closer to the time. So if you've signed up, you will get one. And I can get Heather to put out an email for anyone that's signed up. She will definitely be following up if you have.
Thank you, Nan, for that update. But if there's nothing else, I thank you for joining us this evening for this community in practice, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.